I'm really jazzed to have us jump into it. The folks who you see here are the people who are going to be talking to you today. We'll get started with a quick round of introductions. Leslie, do you want to go ahead and start us off?
Sure, we actually have two Leslies now on the team, but my name is Leslie Hasketh. Recently changed my name, so you may see that differently now. I'm the Director of Adoption Strategy on our Instructional Materials and Implementation team, and I'll kick it off to the other Leslie.
Morning, everyone. My name is Leslie Cuellar, and I am the Texas Home Learning Recruitment Lead.
And I am Gloria Matthews. I work on high quality instructional materials integration for TEA.
My name is Megan Rios, and I am the HQAM Print Operations Manager.
Awesome. We're all really glad to be here with you on a Thursday morning. We appreciate you taking the time and are eager to walk through some guidelines for you and to hopefully have some time to answer some of your questions. So the agenda for today will go over Decision 2A just to give folks a reminder of why you're here and what you're signed up for and what to expect. And then we'll go over district and vendor guidelines. We have a lot of folks from districts here today. We have a few vendors as well. We want to make sure that those expectations are really clear across the board for everyone. And then we'll talk through some timelines, milestones, print updates, and allowable expenses to get into the details of Decision 2A and make sure that everyone knows what those expectations are. And then, as I said before, we'll leave some time at the end to touch on some things we've been hearing from a bunch of folks and to take some questions and answers from you all. So to overview Decision 2A, it's been a long time, like I said, since we've been together, so I wanted to just give a quick recap of what Decision 2 is in TCLAS. Decision 2 is all about implementing high quality instructional materials, and we are here specifically to talk about 2A. So in 2A, the implementation of high quality instructional materials, there are two pathways. There's in-kind support, which is CRMSI, and then there is the state-approved vendor list where people are receiving direct grant funds to implement and design high-quality instructional materials usage. So Megan is here to talk to us a little bit about 2B and print materials, but mostly we're going to be focusing here today on that state-approved vendor list piece and talking through some of the details in that. So for folks who are here today, there are a number of people who are using direct grant funds in a number of different ways. So I want to make sure that we sort of walk through some of the different scenarios that folks may be in the state approved vendor list category. So I'm going to walk through a couple of different use cases for folks who are using state approved vendor list funds. So the first one is those of you who are here who have received state-approved vendor list funds only. These are folks who received direct grant funds and are using those funds to partner with a design and implementation vendor and a professional learning vendor, and who are planning for HQIM implementation for the full year. So this grant was given based on the amount of time that you applied for, so it can look a number of different ways for different folks, but these are the people who received only state-approved vendor list funds. And that is their only use case. So that's kind of the simplest scenario. There are also folks here who are receiving two different kinds of support. There are some folks who are in CRMSI, who are receiving CRMSI in-kind supports for the full year of implementation, but who receive direct grant funds for summer. The use of those funds is to partner with a design and implementation vendor and a professional learning vendor for summer implementation specifically. Those grant funds should be used to support summer and the HQIM that you are using in summer. And the grant period for that is, of course, this summer. So a quick note about this, that there are some folks who maybe did not know that they were in this category, or with some changes were unsure what category they fell in. We are going to be sending out a guidance in the coming days with more information about which of these categories you fall into, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. But there, I know, are a few folks who received CRMSI funding and plan to do CRMSI in the summer. And there was an update to CRMSI that said, we're now going to be supplying direct grant funds to folks who are implementing in the summer. So that is, that's the piece of clarity here now, is that there's no CRMSI summer. So if you were originally planning to do CRMSI supports in summer, you're now receiving those direct grant funds for summer. In a similar vein, the same is true of pre-K funds, that folks who originally signed on to do pre-K are now receiving direct grant funds to implement pre-K. So those folks who are in CRMSI but are also implementing pre-K materials will be receiving direct grant funds for that implementation. And again, the use of those funds is specifically designed to be used for pre-K. So you'll be partnering with a design and implementation vendor and a professional learning vendor. And there are just a couple of approved vendors for those teaching strategies materials. So that's just something to note for those professional learning vendors. Again, key objectives is to make sure that that pre-K implementation and professional learning support is there. And the grant period is the full year, just as the regular state approved vendor list funds. So there are some folks who are getting state approved vendor list funds for pre-K and summer, but who may also be participating in CRMSI. This is the same as the last two scenarios. It's just combined pre-K and summer. So if you're doing pre-K and summer, that those funds are used for design and implementation vendors to support for those two contexts. So while you're getting full year support through CRMSI, the direct funds are meant to support pre-K and summer implementation. The last use case we have is math innovation zones. So these folks all fall into 2A as well, and they're just using that support to implement a blended learning component to help implement the HQIM. So these funds, I mean, these folks could fall into full state approved vendor list. They could fall into almost full CRMSI, and they're using those funds in the same way, partnering with a professional learning vendor and a design and implementation vendor. But there are only 6 approved design and implementation vendors for math innovation zones. So that's the caveat there. And again, the grant period here is the same. Folks may be starting in the summer and then implementing into the full year. So this is a lot of different use cases for these funds, and folks are really having specific scenarios based on their context. So I just wanted to take a moment to name that we're conscious that folks may be wondering exactly which of these categories they fall into. If you're not sure which of these profiles fits your district, we have a couple of ways where you can learn more. You can look at your initial TCLAS award letter, which says how much funds you received and for what. There was also an adjustment email that was sent out in October. I put the subject line and the date here so that you can search your inbox in case that's helpful. That will have information about whether you were given funds for summer or for pre-K as a result of that CRMSI shift. And also, we are going to be sending out a future email with more information about your Decision 2A awards, just to make sure that folks are crystal clear about the supports that they received. We also have office hours every Tuesday from 8:30 to 9 a.m. And this is a really good place to come and get supports if you're not exactly sure what your award looks like. We are always there and happy to answer questions about use of funds or your specific scenario, and are happy to guide you along there. So that's a really good resource and a great place to come if you feel like you're not exactly sure about your context. So those are the many different use cases of these funds. I'm going to pass it over to Leslie to talk through district and vendor guidelines.
And thank you. And if you guys do have questions, I'll just pause here for like 15 seconds. If you guys need to process anything, either write them down to save them for afterwards or drop them in the chat. Okay, I'm gonna click to the next slide. And office hours are from 8:30 to 9 a.m. every Tuesday morning. Okay, so this is a quick recap. We have shown this slide lots, both to our vendors and to you all. But no matter where you kind of land within that spectrum of different profiles, depending on whether you're CRMSI, a mix of CRMSI and state approved vendor list funds, whether you're just doing pre-K and CRMSI for everything else, many of the planning deliverables for the 2A direct grant funds are going to be the same. So this is a quick recap of what those deliverables are. You'll see it split into 2 sections. So on the left side, we have this district implementation support. And the intention is with these funds, you actually contract with 2 types of vendors. with the caveat that there's a couple vendors on our state approved vendor list that provide both types of support. And you can see that in our state approved vendor list guide. That's a PDF that was published back in August. But on this district implementation support, these deliverables are meant to kind of more gear towards campus leadership and district leadership to help your district or charter really think through those big picture pieces that need to be in place prior to implementation. So you can contract with a vendor that's meant to support all of these implementation deliverables and help you build those out. And then on the right side, we have that HQIM specific professional learning and a set of deliverables associated with that. Again, there's a different set of vendors that can help build out these deliverables for professional learning, except those couple that span both sides of the chart here. I'm not going to spend too much time getting too detailed on exactly what these deliverables look like, but we work and have been working very closely with all of the vendors on our approved vendor list, including ESCs, and they can help you build out these deliverables. So the intent of contracting with a vendor is so that they can help you through all of these steps. So it should not be just you as a district trying to muddle through and put together all of these different pieces, but that you actually have a lot of support in doing so. You can click to the next slide. To get to those deliverables, I just wanted to take a quick second and think big picture about some of the guidelines and the things that we're hoping come out of these grant funds. On the LEA side, Decision 2A is really all about implementing an approved Tier 1 material that's on our HQIM approved list, and using these funds to develop really clear goals to reach for that specific instructional content areas, whether you're focusing on math, science, social studies, RLA, all of those pieces. These funds can help you design clear implementation roles and responsibilities across the district, develop clear plans to provide aligned training and supports for teachers, coaches, and your administrators, and then ultimately help facilitation support for professional learning aligned to the core products you guys are implementing. Less applicable to you guys, but on the vendor side, like I mentioned earlier, they are really responsible for helping you guys through this process. So in terms of guidelines, we are looking to vendors to support you all in creating and giving feedback and helping you guys continuously improve on your implementation and professional learning of those products, help you guys build out that customized implementation and professional learning plan. And I keep saying customized because it really should fit your local context. We'll be looking to vendors to actually submit deliverables on your behalf. So we're hoping that you are not having to do the heavy lifting of submitting anything back to us as part of the grant, but that vendor takes care of that. And ultimately that the vendor that you guys select just really serves as a thought partner and strategic advisor that helps you overcome all of these implementation barriers. So to get to all of these deliverables, we are going to be setting some larger milestones, and we've outlined some key dates here. And I really want to harp on that we're using these as milestones because we know that this is going to look very different in a lot of different contexts. So I'm going to start from the top here and just kind of walk through these, and then I'll pause if you guys have questions at the end.
So as you can see here, the first and foremost among the key pieces is a partnership with a vendor. And we realize that folks may be on different timelines for this, especially those who are starting in the summer, are needing to get those partnerships up and running right away. So our goal for those is to happen as of April 1st. So these should be partnerships that are already in progress and ongoing. And we really do want to make sure that those partnerships are formalized. So folks who are implementing in the summer of 2022 should already have a formal partnership in place with their vendor. And if not already, make sure that you're taking action on that as soon as possible. For folks who are implementing in the full year, we are saying that May 6th should be the goal for having that formal partnership in place with your design and implementation vendor and your professional learning vendor. The design and implementation strategic plan has all those components that Leslie just walked through. Again, we recognize that this may look different for folks implementing in the summer and implementing in the full year. So folks who are implementing in the summer, we're having them shoot to turn that in at the beginning of May, and folks who are implementing in the full year, the beginning of June. The instructional vision and SMART goals are a part of that, as are the stakeholder engagement plan. The master schedule with aligned minutes, again, also allowing some flexibility here for folks who are working that out as summer begins and planning for the following year. So we are looking to see those in May to June of 2022, along with the instructional calendar that has those aligned minutes, scope and sequence, unit assessments, and professional learning. And then feedback surveys are a really key part of this process for us. So we're looking to different timelines for folks, again, with that summer implementation and full year implementation. So you can see the timelines there for those feedback surveys. And then for professional learning support, again, the same partnership with a vendor timeline here. April 1st for those implementing in the summer and May 6th for those implementing in the full year next year. And then making sure that there's a professional learning plan in place, again, before the summer for those implementing in the summer and in the summer for those implementing in the full year. That student-led data submission is not applicable for the people who are implementing in the summer, but we will be collecting it on a regular cadence for those people who are implementing in the full year. And again, those feedback surveys about professional learning vendors and the experience there are going to be taken regularly, both for summer implementation and for full year implementation. So a couple of pieces of guidance about data submission and feedback cycles. Districts are going to be responsible for ensuring that vendors have access to deliverables and data. The goal is to use data to inform your implementation and strategic plan. So this is to ensure that if vendors are helping you out with creating those plans, that they have access to that data and are able to be a part of that process. So please meet with your vendor to determine how you're going to keep and record data and how you're going to be sharing data with them. We know that this may look different based on folks' context. So having clear communication with the vendor about data is an important part of this process. Vendors are going to be the ones responsible for sharing deliverables and data trends with us at the milestones that we just walked through. So it is important that vendors have access to the discussion about the data as a part of that process. I don't know, Leslie, if you wanted to add anything else here to give a little more context.
I think for the most part that covers it. I put a little note down here, but just something to keep in mind is a data sharing agreement. If you guys would like to enter into one with a vendor, because you guys will be sharing that data, it's just something for you to consider as a district.
Awesome. And then I'm going to pass it over to Megan, who's going to talk through some print updates for us.
Awesome. Thanks, Gloria. So as a reminder for some context, Decision 2B covers print materials access for multiple pilots, including this upcoming school year. So currently there are 3 pilots in progress. If you're participating in spring, your items should have already arrived. If your district has not, there's going to be an upcoming slide with the link to the help desk so you can let us know. A quick plug that if you're participating in summer and you order teaching strategies, which is our pre-K materials, those should be arriving now, or they might have arrived over the last 2 weeks. There are a few that are going to arrive over the summer, but the majority should be there already or be there very soon. Gloria, if you can go to the next slide. So this slide has a more zoomed in view for the full year 22-23. The blue section that you see here, primarily in May, are for products that require digital rostering. So your contact information has been shared with the publishers or whoever filled out the print order survey, and they should be reaching out within those blue windows to set up district-wide or campus-wide rostering. If you're not the person who manages the digital access piece, when the publisher reaches out, that's when you can connect to them with whoever that might be. And then the orange pieces, the orange pieces are the shipping windows. Please note that we've asked publishers to not ship or deliver anything the week of 4th of July because we know that schools shut down during that week. And then one other plug is that some publishers are going to send their materials in batches. So those are noted by the blue plus sign. So those are Eureka, Amplify, SLR Skills, and then PhD Science. And the next slide. we are building a repository for all of this information to live moving forward. So if you're someone who's like getting your summer stuff right now and you need inventory list or pacing guides, whatever that is, you can access that through the link there, which again, Gloria will send out after this. And then we're building it out for full year 22-23 right now. So check back in a few weeks and all of that information should be there moving forward. And then next slide. So we are hosting 2 webinars, one for summer, one for full year 22-23. If you're participating in both, we'd highly recommend that you join both because there'll be different information for each of them. So we would suggest that you invite anybody who is in charge of materials management, allocation, maybe your warehouse, whether that be folks who are on individual campuses or your central district. We know that folks, the contacts have changed a lot. So whoever you think would benefit from any of those pieces, feel free to forward this to them and invite them to join. And then the last slide that we have here is the help desk. So if you have any questions, the fastest way to get a hold of us and for us to get back to you is through the help desk here through the Texas Home Learning link. It'll be linked there. That's it for us, Gloria.
Thanks so much, Megan. All right, I'm gonna move us on to talk through a couple of frequently asked questions so that we can talk through hopefully some of the things that are top of mind for many of you. And then we will again move into taking some questions from you all.
The question right
get
quick.
those questions answered. Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead. You can jump in.
The previous slide, the 2 slides before where you had the information. Yeah, that one. Is there a way we can get that? Can you put those links in the chat or something so that we can pass it on?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put those in the chat, and we're also going to send out this slide deck along with the recording at the end, so that everyone has access. There are sort of a lot of links flying around in this presentation, and we want to make sure that everyone has access to all of them. So we'll certainly send this out so that you can click on those links. I know it's a lot to keep track of for sure. So we'll move on. We'll talk through a couple of frequently asked questions, and then we'll take some questions from you all. The biggest thing that has been coming up has been the allowable and unallowable uses of funds for Decision 2A. So want to highlight here a couple of key things that have been coming up. So the key use of funds for Decision 2A is to support the approved Tier 1 HQIM products and contracting with a vendor on that state approved vendor list to support the implementation and professional development for those high quality instructional materials. If your LEA has grant funds left over after securing those contracts, these funds may be used for stipends for teachers and coaches that are implementing the materials. They may be used for additional Tier 1 materials if initial print orders didn't cover all the teachers implementing or replacing consumables for the next school year. They may be used for aligned Tier 2 and 3 supplemental products such as Amplify Reading, M-Class, or Mafia beyond the state license term. And they may be used for aligned trade books such as Amplify Tradebook Guide for grades K through 12. So this, you can see at the bottom, there's also a note with more guidance about the approved products there. And we are adding errata to add stipends as an allowable expense there. So just a note that you may not see stipends in that guidance, but we are making plans to adjust that so that that's more clear. As for the unallowable uses of funds, supporting the use of Tier 1 products not listed under the Decision 2 in the TCLAS guidance document is unallowable. Supplies not relating to implementation or professional learning of the approved resources, for example, paper, trade books, pencils, etc. And then contracting with a vendor not on that state approved vendor list is not an approved use of those funds, and using funds for items listed as allowable if the LEA has leftover funds without contracting with an implementation and professional learning vendor. So that is a broad overview. Hopefully that does give a little more clarity and understanding to those uses of funds. So some things that have been coming up across the board, we talked through this first one a little bit before and are going to provide more clarity in an upcoming email. But many folks have been looking at that original award letter that says we were awarded CRMSI and we did not receive any direct grant funds. Why are we getting invited to this webinar about the state approved vendor list funds? And the answer is that there are 2 reasons for that. you may be hearing state approved vendor list updates if you're originally signed up to do CRMSI for summer, and in that adjustment got direct grant funds for summer to support implementation, or you originally signed up to do pre-K through CRMSI, and in that adjustment got direct grant funds to support pre-K implementation. So that is a little more information there, but as we said earlier, we're going to send out a communication that has more information about your specific award so that you have clarity about which pieces apply to you. A second question that's been coming a lot is, are ESCs approved for approved vendors for design and implementation and professional learning support? The answer there is yes. There's been some confusion because they're not on that state approved vendor list, but they are approved vendors for both design and implementation and professional learning. And then I think that Leslie spoke to this well earlier, but there have been questions about the role of the vendors in supporting the districts, and whether or not the key role of the vendor is to provide those deliverables. We just want to name here that the role of the vendor is broader than just those deliverables, and it's also really specific, dependent on folks' specific scenarios. So we wanted to just sort of grant you the freedom and understanding that you should be working with vendors really to solve the problems that are coming up for you. We are looking to those deliverables to get a sense of where you are in readiness for implementation, but that the role of the vendor is to support you in making sure that you are ready for having those products in place. So a few next steps just to keep top of mind is that you make sure that you know your Decision 2 TCLAS award and are clear about the award amount your district has received. We are sending out a PDF of your Decision 2 award with amounts broken out into subdecisions 2A, 2B, etc. So you will be able to see the breakdown there, know if you are, even if you are in CRMSI, if you are awarded that pre-K funding or that summer funding, that will be clear there. The key next step is to create that formal partnership with a design and implementation vendor, as well as a professional learning vendor to support your implementation. That is the most important thing that you can do, is make sure that those partnerships are in place so that you can begin the planning process if you have not already. And if you have questions, want to reiterate that we do have office hours for Decision 2 and 3 every Tuesday, from 8:30 to 9 a.m. And that link is in the chat somewhere, but we will send it again. And as I said before, we will send out this presentation so that you have it and you can click the many links within.